Everybody, it is Romania Black, and we're on episode 26 of Frieren. We are down to the last 3 episodes of season 1. I've been really happy that this season has gone on beyond 24 episodes. I know I was talking to the moderator, Floor, who is moderating this series, and she was like, yeah, I keep forgetting that there are more episodes. And I was like, right? Which is such a great feeling. So it's nice to know we still have 3 episodes, because last episode almost seemed like the climax of this dungeon battle. It seemed like Frieren and Fern had worked together. We had the little flashback, the montage, and then we were going to destroy the replica of Frieren using Fern's magic. And then it seems like we're going to wrap things up possibly in this episode, because I have a feeling that once the Frieren replica is gone, I don't think Dinkin and the others may have as much challenge with the rest of the replicas. And besides, it will lead Frieren and Fern straight to the Spiegel so they can take it out and then stop the replicas, even if they were a problem. So I feel like that's going to wrap up this episode. The question is, when they get to the bottom, how's that going to fare? How is it going to be if we have all of these people being able to advance to the bottom of the dungeon? What about the one guy that's off by himself? How's that going to work? So I'm really excited to see what goes down this episode. And then we have 2 more after that, so it's like a treat. But I've got some comments I want to talk to before we get to that point. First, we have Wolf and Doggo. They said that Sens is pronounced Senza. Sorry if I've been mispronouncing it this entire time. German is not my native language. So Senza, which is like sense. Y'all know who I'm talking about. It feels weird to call her Senza now that I've been saying sense this entire time and nobody else has corrected me, so I don't know what to do. But we'll just go with that. Adius Barbatus said that Flom in German can also allude to fluff, like a kitten. And that kind of matches Flom's personality, where they kind of are like fluffy. They're just very like happy and optimistic and upbeat about humanity and magic in general, which I feel like there's part of Sari that kind of, enjoys that, because they don't share that same viewpoint. So it's kind of nice to see like, oh, here's your perspective. Nice. That's different than mine. I find it intriguing. It's something different and unique. So I like that. I like that little translation there. Thinking Devil pointed out a couple other name translations, saying that in episode 22, the chef's name Lecker means delicious. I wonder if that Lecker ties to liquor. I wonder if there's like some kind of nomenclature, some kind of linguistical connection there, right? And then Blay, who is basically One Punch Man, his name means lead, as in take the lead, which is interesting because he's the one that kind of enables Dunst to get to the others. So I guess he was kind of a leader in that sense, even though Edel did a lot to propel that. Edel means noble or high class. Seems fitting for her personality. Dunst means a haze or fumes, which is kind of funny because he's like the last fumes of that group running to catch up with the others. So that's cool. I like it. And then Ubel, this isn't necessarily Thinking Devil's comment, but Ubel and Land, they had talked about their ship name being Ubeland. And I was like, yeah, you could do Ubeland. We were talking in the Discord because I'm a major shipper of Land and Ubel. I personally like the ship name that was proposed as Lube. It's right there. It's begging you to use it. It's right there sitting there. Why not? So, Lube. I feel like the name Lube as a ship name is great because, it involves and is tied to a lot of prep work, which is what Ubel is doing in prepping to empathize with Lon. So yeah, that seems pretty open, and we'll just not say any more on that. I thought that was hilarious. I laughed for a solid minute whenever I saw that in the Discord, so thank you. Whoever wrote that comment, thank you. Bless you. Alex Cornejo points out how it is curious how people from the initial group, who were all tied together, ended up, despite the fact that they had free choice, ended up staying with the groups that they originally were paired with from the first challenge into the second challenge, even though they didn't have to do that. And I talked to Alex in my comment reply back on Patreon saying that, yeah, it's kind of like I notice as a teacher, especially in like a collegiate setting, like throughout high school and grade school. In grade school, oftentimes you get assigned seats, like your name's on the desk. That's where you go to every day. You have your little cubby space in your desk, so you put all your stuff there. At least that's how my grade school experience was. And you have like a desk that organizes your things. And then once you get into like junior high and high school, you have lockers. So you have lockers that you put all your stuff in, but still occasionally some junior high and high schools, they have assigned seats, you know, to help, like if people are having behavioral issues, or if you've got like a gossipy clique of kids that are just being like little devils to each other, you're like, okay, we're gonna split you up. So in high school you have assigned seats as well. Here's the thing, in college you don't have assigned seats, but as a teacher, I have noticed over the years that first week, everybody picks their seat, and it's become so ingrained in our culture, that idea, that kind of authoritative, like, here's where you sit, this is what you do, we're creatures of habit, we go to these same spots, that like, they go back to their same seats every week, and I'm like, y'all don't have to. You can mix it up. And I've noticed that if somebody sits in the wrong seat or moves it, then people are like, you're in my seat. And I was like, well, it's technically not your seat. There are no assigned seats. You can sit wherever. It's fascinating. So I feel like it is a little bit of a insight into human behavior. Whereas even though they didn't get a choice in who they were paired up in the first group, they've gained that trust, that relationship, those bonds with those individuals. And then they carry that over to the second challenge where they could actually choose their partners, and they still stayed with the same ones. So I think it's like a cool little subtle look at human behavior. And so I'm glad you pointed that out, Alex. That was really good. And then Christopher Peterson. Christopher Peterson's been watching as they comment. So at the time that they commented this, they were like on episode 22. So it's been a few episodes since then. But they were questioning whether Sens or Senza came up with this test to see if anybody could help her get to the bottom, if she was able to get to the bottom. And because they posited that, saying that because she nearly tripped over one of the initial traps and Frieren and Fern had to save her, if she was just going with the strongest group to see if they can make it. And then questioned, has this been a previous test before? We saw Levine's brother go in the tomb on a like advanced scouting mission. That doesn't mean necessarily that it was a test, just that it was a scouting mission, and some of them made it back alive. We're not sure, but I don't know. I thought that since triggering the trap was just to test and see if Frieren and Fern were worth following. Because if they got, if they didn't end up, I feel like Sens could find a way out using her abilities, especially with her magic hair. But I don't know. That's a really good question. I guess this episode we'll find out and see if Sens was like, oh, hey, we made it to the bottom. Never did this before. Good. Thank y'all. Or if that was their intent all along. We'll see. I guess we'll see with that. But with that being said, I really, really appreciate the comments for this episode. I appreciate y'all, and I'm super, super excited to see what we end up getting as we move forward into these last couple of episodes. I have loved Frieren. It has been such a fantastic journey, such a breath of fresh air. And as someone that is generally optimistic, it's nice to watch a series where that optimism is portrayed as realism. Because oftentimes, anytime you're like optimistic in a series, somebody in the comments is like, well, in real life, things are not that optimistic or positive. And I'm like, well, they can be, you negative Nancy. And so it's nice to see a series that is realistic, but also taking it in a lighter, more positive light. I appreciate it, and doing it with class and subtlety, and it's not preachy. It's done very, very well, and so I appreciate that. But with that being said, we've talked enough. We are going to start episode 26 of Frieren Beyond Journey's End, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's do this. I mean... I freaking love Frieren, and I'm going to be so sad when the series ends, because I have come to really enjoy this week to week. And just in some ways, Frieren finds a means to subvert your expectations, but also to satisfy you at the same time. And it never feels cheap. It never feels preachy. It never feels forced. It feels natural. And when it happens, you're like, well, of course. So I was really glad in hindsight that I thought this episode was going to be a lot of everybody else fighting the other replicas. But then when I was in the intro, I was like, well, that doesn't make sense, because after they beat the Frieren replica, all they have to do is destroy the Spiegel, and we've established that's going to be really easy. And it almost seems too easy, but then you see what it creates, and you're like, oh no, this makes sense. So as we were going into the intro, I was like, maybe we aren't going to immediately cut to Frieren's replica being destroyed, because then that kind of ends the episode. Unless we kind of backtracked and showed what was happening while they were battling Frieren's replica and seeing everybody else, which is kind of what we get. But the nice subversion is that Fern's attack from last episode didn't instantly like one-shot the Frieren replica, which makes sense, right? So the studio doing the animation in this episode, oh my God, it was just so fluid and beautiful. It reminds me of the dragon fight with Stark back at the beginning of the series. It reminds me of that fluidity. And what I really like about it is, I know that I talked about it with the Stark battle alongside the dragon. There is an artist who is known for that, like cubism, where it's like the explosions, the rocks turn into cubes and everything. It's beautiful. It's very well done, but it's not realistic. And so in that moment, I say this for an animated series, so y'all can roll your eyes at me, but I like it to be a little bit more hyper realistic in that moment and a little more fluid. And the geometric shapes, sometimes it's a little too abstract for me, and it's fine. I don't mind it. It's just not necessarily my cup of tea. This is my cup of tea. I love the chaos of it. I feel like sometimes the cubism, it's too organized. It's too like, oh, we all burst into perfectly shaped cubed stones. And it's like, yeah, okay. But I love this because it's all chaotic. It's mixed matched, but it's fluid and it feels like liquid. And it's just it's mwah, chef's kiss. I love this animation style. I love the flowing. Whenever the hair is flowing, anime hair makes everybody with hair envious, because it's like, if this happened in real life, it would get so knotted and you just not know what to do with it. It's so perfect. Whenever Frieren has that moment where the hair is like billowing in her face and she's looking at the replica of herself, oh my God, I'm going to take a screenshot of it now because it's just so perfect. I love it so much. And I like that it's just this battle of attrition. I like that Frieren makes the golem out of stone. That part's really good. And then they're just trying to find a way to get around it. That it's just, we got to whittle it down till we get to an opening, right? So Methode, I honestly would have Methode on my zombie survival party anytime. She seems resourceful. She has healing abilities. She's able to detect mana. She feels she's a good strategist. Like, she is low key kind of an MVP in this arc, because she doesn't even brag about it either. She just shows up and she's like, yes, she gets a little proud there towards the end, and I was getting a little worried. I was like, ooh, are you foreshadowing that you're going to suffer? But no, she deals with it right. I can't believe, out of all the ones in this group, that I didn't think were going to make it past this episode. If you told me that Dunst was out, I would have believed it, right? Would have believed Dunst. He seems like he's more of a defensive person. I would have pegged Dunst being out. I would have pegged Laufin, because I feel like speed is kind of her only shtick. So I would have pegged her being out. Laufin and Dunst, yes. Kinney, Kinney and Levine, I didn't figure either of them would get past, because I think that while they do have a lot of strategy and good magic, they feel like they often have to work in tandem. I think that's going to be Kinney's problem moving forward, because her and Levine are used to working together and being a tag team. And now, since Levine's out, that's not going to happen. So I worry for Kinney. I don't see Dunst moving further, or Laufin, because they seem a little bit dependent. So those three, I worry about making it past the third leg, but I honestly didn't think they were going to make it past the second. And then for Richter and Levine to get out, but not the others, I was like, oh, it sucks. But you know, with Richter, it kind of almost seems practical, where Richter kind of, he's doing the exam, but then when we cut back in episode 22 to him kind of like being like working at his little tinker shop, I'm like, you're not gonna be mad if you don't pass this test. That was kind of like, looking back on that episode, I was like, you're really not gonna care if you don't pass. You're just kind of doing this for funsies. All right. So I didn't quite feel so bad for Richter. I think Richter was like, well, it happened. I'll come back in 3 years. No big deal. He's very practical about it, which ties to his character. Whereas I did feel kind of bad for Levine, because she seems like she kind of has a little chip on her shoulder with her brothers. She wanted to kind of pass it, and she wanted to stay with Kinney and pass it. And I was like, damn, girl. I did kind of feel bad for her, especially because it was Sensa just coming out of nowhere. And oh my God, Sensa is terrifying. Sensa is one of my favorite characters as far as the antagonists go. Sensa is one of my favorites. I love her character because she's so OP and strong, but she has this pacifist personality where she kind of has this air of, I could kill you all, but I'm not going to. It's like the Miss America answer, be like, well, I could destroy everyone in this room, but I'm a nice person, so. I just love her character. And I love Ubel. Ubel, after this episode, the lube ship is like oiled up and ready to go. I love Ubel. We're going to talk about her in this episode. I freaking love her character. We're going to talk about her. But Sensa, I love her too. She's amazing. But yeah, they were all set to go battling these replicas. The two things that were scariest about this episode were, one, the fact that Sensa's replica made it to the basement. That was insane. As soon as Laufin was like, I can't believe how easy this is, I was like, bitch, why you say that? You're gonna jinx everybody. And she does. The other thing that was terrifying was the confirmation that the replicas would keep respawning. They would keep coming back. I was like, oh, it's not just a matter of we'll destroy the replicas and then make our way to the basement. No, it's the matter of they keep respawning and coming after you over and over again. I was like, nope, not having it. I feel like it was intentional for the series to not show us Dinkin's replica, because I feel like Dinkin is going to be a major character, if not in this arc, in the overall story. So I feel like Dinkin not getting his replica shown was intentional, because the mangaka doesn't want to reveal everything that Dinkin can do yet. So fair. And then revealing the subtle little things Frieren can do in a jiffy, in a pinch, was kind of like, oh, okay. We'll talk about that when we get to it. But yeah, everything seemed like it was going well, but then nope, everybody's like, we're gonna follow the plan and be good. But they're like, Sensa's replica is a problem. If Sensa's replica gets in there, we could die. And I like how they couldn't detect Fern or Dinkin's replica, which they have that mana blocking ability, which makes sense and ties back to that. Fern's replica was going to be a problem. And I think that shot of Methode sitting there with the giant holes in the wall was like, yeah, Fern was going to be an issue. But I like how Richter looks over to Sensa, and they're like, you know, if you weren't here, we wouldn't have to worry about this. And Sensa's like, well, it's a test, sweetie. Sensa reminds me a little bit. I'm obsessed with Drag Race, so I've watched like every season at this point. Sensa reminds me a little bit of the drag queen Valentina, where there's an episode on the pit stop where she's like, well, you know, I'm just gonna continue to be kind and successful and continue towards success. She's like, gives the Miss America answer, be like, don't hate me because I'm beautiful, sort of thing. And Sensa's kind of the same way. She's like, I'm the proctor. This is the test. I'm sorry, it's challenging. I love that Sensa's like, you know, you need to be able to overcome unfair adversity. And she's totally right. She's like, you know, not every battle that you face is going to have fair rules and standards. She's like, you're going to have to get down and dirty sometimes. And, oh, I'm sorry that I've made this contest difficult for you. She's like, this doesn't even qualify as adversity. She's like, if you just work together and have each other's back, you can pass the test. I like that at this point she speaks up when they're at the end in the climax, because before she's like, I'm not offering you any comment. And now when she gets called out, she's like, well, we're at the end of the game anyway. And she's like, I'm just going to tell you, if y'all had worked together from the start, you could have all solved this real quick and we wouldn't have had an issue. But she's like, look, she's like, is this not truly a kind and peaceful test? And then we cut to her spearing, you know, Lavine and Richter with her hair. I think Sensa's ability is one of my favorites too, because it's the hair. And it's like, yes, you can have all this defensive magic, all these secrets buried in her hair. It regenerates. It keeps growing. It's like, would be a nightmare to take care of, right? She's like, I don't even want to think about it. She probably uses magic to take care of her hair. But just, damn. Sensa's, like, her replica was terrifying. And also, I like that Sensa and Frieren's replicas give an idea of how important it is that these characters have personalities like they do, because they could be strong enough to destroy you. Looking back in hindsight, I feel like it makes sense that Richter didn't pass this test, because a lot of this episode talks about visualization of victory and how we visualize winning. And Richter is very practical, but also he's kind of pessimistic. So he could easily visualize not being able to win. So I'm not surprised in hindsight that he didn't make it to the end. I'm like, okay, all right. So then Ubel and Land show up, and Ubel's like, oh hey, what's going on? Are we gonna have to fight this thing? And here's the thing, a big part of Ubel's thinking process, she says, do we have to fight this? Do we have to beat this to advance? And I really like her way of thinking in this moment, because Dinkin's like, he's like, I need to be focusing on this. And she's like, I just want you to answer the question. Is this necessary or is it not? And technically, yeah, they have to defeat the replicas to stay in the game. So he's like, yes. She's like, okay, cool. I have to beat it, then I will. Ubel's character, I thought from the moment we met her back at the beginning of the episode, I was really worried, because everybody had been kind of building up in the Discord and building up, being like, oh, she's coming. Oh, she's coming. All right, the fan favorite's here. And I was really worried, because sometimes when people hype up characters, you're like, oh, okay, they have a cool design. They have like an edgelord personality. They're funny. Okay, cool. But sometimes the hype doesn't meet up to the reality. And so when we first met her, I was like, okay, she's got a bitchin' design. She's in all black. She's got the goth punk look. She's kind of like got a punk personality where she's like, don't give a F, like whatevs. And then as her journey has gone on, we slowly start to see her character like kind of unraveling and the layers peeling back, which ties to her character. That's about empathizing with others and opening up and bonding with others. And those bonds allow her to steal their magic. And I love that. And so I like in this episode, we take that one step further and we say, not only she just has this insane like shamelessness and an insane, it's optimism. It's this idea of, no, I'm going to do it and it's going to happen. And I'm going to visualize my success. And it all makes sense because she's smart. And she finds clever ways to justify her vision, which is like, it's not delusion. It's like, it is literally, she is like forcing her way through an obstacle she's like water. She's finding a crack, any crack or crevice. She's going to work herself through, and that's how she's going to get through it, which is amazing. And it's so fun because she's paired up with Land seems very pessimistic. And Land's just like, well, I have to have copies of myself because I have to prepare for the worst case scenario. So yes, I always have to have a copy. I have to prepare for the worst, glass half empty. And Ubel wants that magic because she's like, if I had that ability, I'd be so OP and it'd be so amazing. And so one thing though, is that Ubel's like, okay, I'll go face Sensa. I know that we're a great matchup. And the thing about it is Ubel does not reveal any of the backstory to Land or Dinkin. Not a bit. She does not reveal any of her cards. She doesn't let either of them know that she knew Sensa from the second exam, that she's met her, that she's evaluated her, that she's I don't know if she's empathized with her to take her magic. Probably not, because she doesn't have the magic hair. But Ubel has analyzed Sensa enough to know that she believes Sensa can't beat her. Sensa does not believe she can beat Ubel, and Ubel knows it. And Ubel's like, yeah, see, here's the thing. When I killed that first class mage that was proctoring the test, I could envision myself cutting through his cloak. Yeah, it's a piece of cloth. Why couldn't I cut it? Why can't it be that simple? And she's like, your power's embedded in your hair. What's the one thing we do to hair? We cut it. So yeah, I can beat you. And it makes sense. And it's so clever. I love how this series has these characters that are so well written and intelligent, but they don't have to come out and say, I'm super smart. They're like, no, they just are. Like, she in no way, shape, or form. Like, when you see Land, you see the glasses and you think, oh, well, he's probably a very intelligent character. And he is. He is. He's a very practical, intelligent character. Ubel, in any other like shonen anime or manga I would have saw from the 90s, she would have been this punk ass bitch, but she wouldn't have been very smart. She'd just been like, have street smarts, but not be super intelligent. Ubel is intelligent, and I love that she gets to be both because it's so realistic, and I love it. But Land doubts her, and he's like, well, Dinkin's the strongest one here, practically, by technicalities. And she's like, yeah. She's like, he is, like, Wurble and Dinkin have more mana than me. Yes, 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 yes. We're not great matchups. Yes, 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 yes. But Ubel's like, have you been paying attention? Like, the matchups, Frieren touched on it as well. They're not all about mana versus mana. It's about experience. It's about strategy. It's about what you do. And she's like, look, I'm an inexperienced third-class mage, but I think I can beat Sensa. Based on our magical abilities, I think my compatibility. It's basically like when you go into the first Pokemon gym and you got Brock, who's got a level 12 Onix. You got a level 6 Squirtle. And you're like, look, I know level-wise, that Onix is more level than me, more hit points, more attack power, whatever, more defense, whatever. But I also know the power water gun that's going to, like, obliterate it. So that's literally Ubel's thinking. Ubel's like, I know my matchups, and I know I'm going to burst through this real quick, so you just got to believe in me. It doesn't make sense that a little water squirting turtle is going to beat this rock snake, but just you hold on and let me show. Trust and believe. So, yeah. And the thing that gets me in my shipper goggles is that Land is like, but you're not going to beat her. Like, Land, dude, this girl is trying to steal your magic to possibly kill you. But yet, at this, you should be letting her go. Like, go on. Go get killed so that you can use your golem and get out of here. Go on. But Land is so... You could argue that it's Land's personality and that he's actually kind-hearted inside and he doesn't want her to get hurt. Or you could be like me, put on your shipper goggles and be like, he doesn't want her to get hurt. He likes her. He just don't want to admit it. He's getting Stockholm Syndrome into the lube relationship. And it's working. I'm like, oh my God, no. Y'all are going to be like Spy Family where you guys are going to be together for like 50 years and then you're still going to be like, I'm not going to empathize with you. And you're going to have like 10 kids and she's going to be like, are you still empathizing with me? She's like, it cuts anything I think it can cut. And it can't cut anything I think it can. So her magic, she's like, as long as I can visualize it, it'll work. And Land is like, but... He's like, well, but that spell could be blocked by defensive magic. And she's like, I don't believe in defense. She's like, the best kind of defense, Land, isn't a good offense. That's literally what she's telling him. She's like, oh, you watched my battle with Verbal. That's really nice for you. She's like, defensive magic is for blocking spells. But she's like, this isn't really like a spell. It's just like an attack. And he's like, well, either way, I was waiting for Ubel to tell him, be like, well, this is why you're not going to beat Sensa, because you can't visualize it. She's like, you need to open your mind up a little bit more and be a little bit more open-minded to the idea that... I think that, and the thing that's so smart about it, like, I feel like I could write a novel about Ubel's character at this point, if I wanted to. I could go on, like, a spree about Ubel's character. But the thing that gets me about her is that with her character, it's all tied to her power and her ability so smartly, so cleverly, in that the idea that as long as she can visualize it, she can make it work. And the whole point of her empathizing with others is to help visualize them as a person. But in visualizing them as a person, she's able to take in their magic for herself and just make herself stronger and stronger and stronger. I'm like, yes, please. And I love that we get that little tiny visage back into her past. Where, and of course, Sensa's like, yep, I knew the moment I was going to fight her that I wasn't going to win. And the replica knew too. So 2 years ago, there was the second class mage exam. And let's talk about this before we dive back in. So we have the other guy there, whatever his face was. He was the guy that was with Sensa in this one. And he's one of the proctors. So we have 3 proctors. We have Sensa, we have him, and we have somebody else. So assuming that she was proctoring another exam that no one passed. Interesting. Which I'm assuming she proctored the 3rd exam and nobody passed. But this is a second class mage exam. So... interesting. Well, we don't know either way who ended up passing and who didn't, because Ubel didn't make it past this second stage or whatever this. Yeah, was this the second test? Yes, the second test. So she didn't make it past the 3rd stage of the exam. He was so skilled in defensive magic. Look at him with his light Yagami haircut. So he had this cloak, and I think it's interesting to note this, that even though you get a spell granted to you by Sari, it is not necessarily an invulnerable spell that makes you impervious to all magic. And I think that's an important thing to note, and that's something I think is going to be brought up eventually, if not hasn't already been brought up, is the idea that, yeah, Ceri's giving you these magic spells that are like your wish come true, but that doesn't make you immortal, and it doesn't make you infallible or impossible to kill. And I think that's really important, that you just get a spell that you think is going to be the best defense or the best offense for you, but it's not guaranteed to keep you from dying, right? And so he, obviously, I'm assuming, as first class mage, asked to have the spell to take on all this defensive magic in this cloak to keep him impervious to other magic, but it wasn't infallible. And there we go. So I like the idea of the second test where it's like, oh, you just had to like make Berg budge. All you had to do is make him budge. Just take one step back and you'd pass. But if you killed him, it would... I like that they're like, killing will result in disqualification. Because he's like, otherwise I can't, proctor any more tests. But then they said there were limits imposed on offensive magic to protect the other test takers. So it's kind of like, it's like a big handicap. Like, oh, you can't go all out. You can't kill me. You just have to find a way to like make me take a step back with, I don't know, I guess some of your magic. It felt like a very rigged test. Because I feel like Ubel kind of calls it out when she kills him. Kind of like, how does this apply to a real world scenario? Right? Because at least in Jeannot's test, in the first part, Jeannot's like, you have to work together. You might end up on the battlefield with random people you don't know, but you have to fight a common enemy. So you have to figure out how to work together quickly, how to form a team and use teamwork. Like that all seems practical. It seems like real world applications. And he's like, you may have to secure something and keep it safe to use for later or to bargain with or something like else. There's a real world application to that test. Right? Even though there were parts of it, like the barrier, that were kind of influenced, that wouldn't necessarily happen in real life, it still was a test that has a lot of real world applications. Sens's test has some real world applications. It's about teamwork and working together. You can defeat a common enemy, no matter how strong they are, if you all use teamwork and work together and use strategy. That's a real world application. This guy, Berg, his test... Under what circumstance are you not going to be able... They're basically like, you can't go all out, like you would likely have to in a real world scenario. You can't kill your opponent, which, if you're fighting the Demon King, that's kind of the point. You can't, take a risk and potentially injure the people around you. Is that going to likely be a scenario that's going to happen in the real world? His test seemed very just catered to make you fail. And was not applicable. And I feel like Ubel was just kind of like, screw it. I don't care. I feel like Ubel was kind of like calling out the hypocrisy of it. And came up and was like, really? Really, bitch? You're going to do this test and try to keep us from passing? You're going to keep doing this test and keep people from passing as long as you keep cheating like this. Let's just cut through the bullshit. And the fact that Ubel just murdered this man without even thinking. Now, at the part of the second stage, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There was 11 of them that made it to the second stage. And I like they cut to Sensa and the one guy, and they're like, she just killed him. Okay. They're like, I guess we can't punish her because it's like you're in a mage exam, but okay. Yeah. I love that Ubel is just not flussed. Not nonplussed at all. She's just like a no-name girl who just became a third-class mage. I feel like that's why her and Fern are kind of similar too, because Fern just took the easiest test she could get to become a mage, and it was just happened to be the third-class exam that was happening at the time. Whereas Ubel was just kind of like did the same, and she's like, oh, I just want to be a mage, and what are you going to tell me? Freaking love Ubel. Love her. And I love that moment she looks over to Sensa being like, you're next. So then we go to Sensa's office. I like Sensa's lotus lamp. I want that in my home. I love that. I love the office there. I do feel like, though, I kind of get like Studio Shaft vibes, like Puella Magi Madoka Magica vibes. There's like 12 lamps in this office. Are these lamps all necessary? There's like 12 lamps. I'm like, Sensa, do you need all of these? You have a window that gives you so much natural light. Why do you need these lamps? It's great. But I love that Ubel's also like, so I failed, right? Can I go? And Sensa's like, how did you defeat? I like that all of these first class mages are very adamant to know how you won. They want to know like, well, how did you win? How are you so strong? Can you tell me your secrets? Like it's all like, we want to know the enemy. We want to know the potential, keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer sort of vibe of tell us your magic, tell us your secrets. And Ubel's like, well, it's pretty easy. I just imagined cutting his cloak like a cloth. I also like the idea of, and this was what made me kind of like relate to Drag Race a little bit, and showing like the class system between Sensa and Ubel. Ubel's like, have you ever sewn before? You kind of seem bougie. You probably haven't ever sewn for yourself in your life. You probably buy your own clothes. She's like, do you use magic to handle all that stuff? Or do you come from a rich family? And Sensa's like, I've never tried it myself since. I like that in this moment, Ubel kind of calls Sensa out for her privilege. She's like, well, do you use magic to do everything for you? Or did you just come from a wealthy family? And Sensa doesn't really get a chance to answer the question. Ubel kind of continues her story without letting her have that moment. She's like, I've never really tried it myself. Ubel has noted that she's not very lucky. She has a lot of bad luck, kind of like Verbel. She's like, I'm really clumsy, so I haven't really tried it. But she's like, I watched my sister do it. And we get like, in this little moment, we see her sister and Ubel. And her sister seems a lot older than her. And they kind of look like they're in kind of like a working class family, the way that they're dressed and kind of the background. And she's like, I watched my sister sew all the time. And then I love that she looks, and then the scissors, she looks like a kid. That's such a great reflection there. Oh, that's so smart. She's like, when you cut cloth, you slide it through so you can visualize the cut. You visualize the angle. It's so well done. And I love that she points, like everything about this entire scene, the symbolism of it, her pointing the scissors towards Sensa, even though she's telling a story and answering the question, it's a threat. She's like, here's how I did it. I can do it to you. So know that. I was like, oh! I just like, yes, please. Yes, ma'am. I'm like, hell yeah. The thing about it is, I feel like in this moment where Ubel, it cuts back to Ubel and Dinkin, and they're both like, we like these kind of tests. I feel like Ubel, I don't know. I question whether would Dinkin take a spell from Sari. I think he would. I think he would take a spell from Sari. I think that Ubel would kind of be like Frieren and be like, nah, I'm not in it for the spell. But then I say Dinkin would take it, but Dinkin's kind of like Frieren too. I feel like Dinkin, Frieren, and Ubel would all look at Sari and be like, I don't need your spell. Nah, I'm good. And just move on. I feel like all three of them are kind of like that. They don't need the spell, right? And I think Fern might fall into that category too. They don't need the spell. They're doing this to get the recognition, to get to that level, to be able to have access to more resources, whatever the case may be. But I don't think it's for the spell. She's like, I have my visual imagination. Do I think Ubel might try to kill Sari if she ever met her? Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I think Sari could defend herself fine, but I think Ubel would literally probably try to kill Sari if she met her, because she'd be like, I feel like Sari is the type of mage, or Ubel is the type of mage that Sari is terrified of. The type of mage that just goes through and kills you like that, doesn't care, is just doing it for their own agenda. I feel like that Ubel is the type of mage that Sari is terrified of. And so it's interesting. I also like that Sensa is like, she's out of her mind. And it's kind of like, just what I love about it is Ubel is not, Sensa kind of questions whether Ubel is quote unquote crazy or not. But no, I don't think she's crazy. I don't think she's a savant. I don't think that she's insane. I think Ubel's like, this is my perspective. This is what my reality is. You can call it delusional, do whatever you want, but this is how I achieve my goals. And it's working in the real world, so I guess it's not crazy. I guess it's logical in that sense. My love for Sensa is still there, and it's been maintained in this episode, But my love for Ubel in this episode has like exploded. Like she's like Ubel, Dinkin, Frieren, Sensa, Fern, Stark. Stark's still there. Bless his heart. They're like my tops. They're my tops in this. I freaking love them. I think I would put Stark in the top more than Fern. I like Fern a lot. Fern is very sweet. I like her character quite a bit. But I think my top 5 at this point, and it may change in the next 2 episodes, my top 5 in this point are Frieren, I like Ubel, Dinkin, Stark, and Sensa. I think they're my top 5. I think I love them the most. But Ubel, oh my God, skyrocket her up there for me, please. And I like that Sensa is just like, the world of magic isn't so simple. And I don't think Ubel is making it simple. I think that she's just like, no, this isn't like an ant crushing a dragon, but this is about visualizing success and visualizing what you can do. And she's like, it is possible for scissors to cut cloth. It is possible for scissors to cut hair. Just because you attached magic to it doesn't make it any less vulnerable. You just have to find the right angle to go at it. I was like, yes, please. Any mage can cut through it. I love it. And so, yeah, Sensa just can't understand her. She's like, despite knowing it can't be cut, she constructed a vision of cutting it with her intuition. Her mind doesn't function like a person's. Which is kind of like a backhanded compliment, but... And I just love that as Ubel moves to the shadows, she's like, that's some pretty hair you got. You should probably cut it. I was like, ah! The tea! The tea! The shade! Freaking love it. Freaking love her. Also, again, with the lamps. Sensa, you got 2 giant, like, full-length windows. You don't need 12 lamps, girl. And she's like, maybe that's when I lost to her then. And Ubel's like, you all think too hard. Hair is something to be cut. Yep, I love it. It's so good. Meanwhile, we cut back and we find out the Verbal and Air and Sharf have all faced down their replicas. Poor Sharf, he gets the shaft. He gets injured in this. I love when he was like, carry me, Verbal. Carry me. I was like, the ship writes itself at this point, right? The shipping is writing itself. But... I like the idea that Methode just kind of tells them, she's like, okay, so you guys are going to fight Dinkin's replica. I'm going to go find Fern's. And I thought it was interesting that Air offered to maybe help her fight Fern. I thought for a split second Methode would take her up on that, kind of like as, oh, you need to get revenge on Fern in this moment. But I'm glad she didn't, because I feel like Air would have died or would have been sent back. And Methode's like, no. What's interesting is that we have the one guy who I think got ejected at the end. We'll go back to that and see that in a minute. We have him who started out this entire adventure into the dungeon being like, I'm going to do it myself. I don't need nobody. I'm all good to go. And we saw that panned out. And then we have Methode who's like, no, I'll face Dinkin's replica or Fern's replica by myself. But it's not that she's trying to do it all on her own to avoid them. It's because she's like, no, I can detect the mana. I can do this. I need to put myself in this position so that you all aren't in danger. I think there's a difference there, and I think that it's important to note that difference, right? I also like everywhere Sharf goes, there's flowers. That part's really cute. So they described facing the replicas as a rock, paper, scissors battle. Ubel is definitely scissors. All the way. All the way. Does that make land paper? I feel like Ubel would be the dominant one in the relationship between Ubel and Land. I feel like that would very much be the case. And I feel like Land would be okay with that. So, go with that. But yeah, I like that Verbal's like, I'm not used to working together, but I'm also not going to turn down the opportunity to become a mage when it's right there in front of me. Like, no, thank you. Meanwhile, I like that we see Methode showing that her ability to bind Fern actually worked. It's so funny because last episode, like, Fern got so mad when Methode was giving Frieren a hug, but then in the same vein, Frieren doesn't care if Fern's like, you know, getting a shoulder massage from Methode. She's just like, oh, isn't that funny? Look at that. Poor Fern. If Stark was there, he'd be like, oh, let her go. Meanwhile, we find out the replicas can respawn. And I like that Ubel and Dinkin are both like, we're okay with this. Let's do this. And Land's like, okay, if you guys are okay with it, can I go? Love it. Love it, love it, love it, love it. Meanwhile, we have everybody facing off. The only thing we get to see is Dinkin, like, about to face Verbal and the others. That's the only thing we get to see. And then we go back to the amazing purple and red, awe-inspiring magic battle between the replica of Frieren and Fern. So they talk about creating a big opening, and that Frieren's like, I'm going to potentially injure myself, but in doing so, I know it will give you an opening to get rid of the other Frieren. And the moment that Frieren got her arm, like, charred in that moment, I was like, damn, the ghost of Himmel is, like, about to rise up out of the grave and be like, what are you doing to my girl? Like, just, he was not going to be having it. Does Frieren have multiple jackets ready at the back at the hotel with Stark to replace this one? We'll find out. But I really thought that Fern was going to get Frieren in that moment. But instead, all she does is, like, chop off her arms. Now, the replica gets her ponytails destroyed. I love seeing Frieren with her hair down. It looks so good. It looks beautiful. And she has, like, a little part of her skirt charred off there in the moment, showing a little bit more skin than Frieren is used to. But here's the thing. That shot of Frieren with her hair down looking terrifying, right? As she just stares at Fern and knocks her back into the wall. Breaks her staff. So I'm like, Fern's poor staff is broken. Our girl, what's she gonna do? Like, she's gonna have to have a new staff made before they go into the next battle. So, in any case, Fern says that what Frieren is using is not an attack as a spell. And she's like, this is the height of magic. So here's my thing. She's in the little square, the little sphere. She doesn't have any arms, so she can't cast a spell that way. She doesn't have a staff. My thing is, if the height of magic is not necessarily Frieren casting a spell against nature, which is the area and manipulating, because we've talked about the magic being used, that it either uses nature itself within the spell, or that it alters nature throughout using the magic. Here, I think the height of magic is manipulating nature itself to be, like, the idea, she's literally manipulating gravity with magic. So, yeah, that seems pretty intense. Now, though, this show is such a big-ass tease, because Frieren's like, oh, I haven't used that in 80 years. You know, 80 years ago when we fought the Demon King. I'm like, ah! I'm like, so you used that against the Demon King? My thing is, I imagine in my head Frieren being injured and using that magic, and then Himmel coming down and just like, how dare you attack my lady? How dare you attack my true love? And just using that moment to kill the Demon King. I feel like that's what happened. I would love to see it, but I feel like the show is not going to show us that for a long time. So we just have to imagine what that was like. And I do like the show does that a lot. The show will give you a scenario or give you a little piece of a moment and be like, yeah, this happened. Imagine it for yourself. And that's kind of cool because it lets us, the audience, kind of, you know, sometimes our own imagination is greater than the actual event of what the mangaka could even think up of. So that was insane. And then Frieren coming in and being like, nope, you left yourself wide open. And then she dissolved it. I'm glad that Fern didn't get kicked out. And she's like, it's been about 80 years since I had to use that. And then she helps her up. I'm glad that when we get to the Spiegel, it was really easy to destroy. And there's all the treasure there. Also, I feel like Methode, looking at all of the Swiss cheese holes that Fern had created in that moment, is probably glad that it ended when it did. Meanwhile, Air and Sharf being like, where will carry me? They're all being like so tired after their battle with Dinkin. So then we get to the treasure room. I love that there's this big ass treasure chest and they all made it through. So yeah, we had our crew, our 12 made it through to the next phase. I love that Verbal's always the one carrying Air and then Sharf from behind him. And she's like, you guys are worthy of becoming first class mages. And they're like, we're the ladies of the hour. And Sens is like, yeah, there's a mimic. I like that Dinkin's like, I just don't understand. I love Dickens. Like, how could she be so powerful? And the whole thing, they're all mimics. There's multiple mimics. She's already, they show 2 mimics that have already been opened up by Fern. And she keeps going to the other ones. Is the giant chest in the center a mega mimic? What is it? Oh, that's so funny. I just now noticed that she's already gone through 2 mimics to get to this point. And Sens is just like, I like the Sens is like, well, this is slightly concerning, but after all the stuff with Ubel, it's fine. She's like, we're good. I love that little shot of her looking back like, never mind, it's fine. The second test is now over. Meanwhile, we find out that the golems can use magic. I like that we see Edel over Richter. I don't know if this is supposed to have us shipping Edel with Richter. It seems like he seems a little nonplussed that she's looking over him and the golem. One Punch Man is looking off in the distance, so he didn't make it out. Fair. And then Stargirl's already reading her next book, and poor Levine. Poor Levine looks so sad that she didn't make it, which is horrible. And so then we see somebody else being carried in. I want to go back to this moment. And it's the one guy. Yeah, it's the one guy from the dungeon. And they're like, who are you? And we don't know who he be. So, okay. Maybe that's supposed to be important next week. I don't know. I'm very curious. I'm very curious indeed. Somebody in the comments were like, oh, you'll need to make sure you remember whose names are whose. Some will be important later. And I was like, okay. Don't spoil me, damn it. But so yeah, I don't know. He's the only character, there has to be some significance to him, I guess, because either he's a no-name character and they're just like, who are you again? And that's the joke, or he has significance and we're going to find it out next episode. But I don't know. Maybe he was meant to throw everybody off by going in first, and that's all there is to it. I don't know. But I guess we'll find out. So this episode was so good. I loved it so, so much. And I'm really excited to hear your thoughts down below. So in any case, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah, I'll be back next week with, if you can believe it, the penultimate episode of Frieren Beyond Journey's End. Bye.